Greetings and welcome to my channel. This is Sorcerer Tal. You can also find me on Facebook in the Sorcerers Guild. Today on Magical Theory we are going to be beginning a new playlist entitled Cryptid Tales. Recently it was requested that I do a playlist on mythological creatures, and I thought that there's a lot of interesting information to cover there that is relevant to sorcery in some ways. So we're going to begin that playlist today, starting with the Wendigo. Okay, so what is a Wendigo? Now this is a being that I do have some personal family lore passed down to me about. This is a very significant being in my family's tales. The Wendigo is the spirit of a lone wolf which is starved to death. Sometimes in a wolf pack, for one reason or another, the pack will become separated. In modern times, this was often because of hunting. If the head wolf or the alpha wolf of a pack is killed, often the pack itself will sometimes break apart to some extent and form smaller packs. You know, there's power struggles, just like in any society. If the leader of the group is killed, there winds up being power struggles, or for other reasons, you sometimes wind up with these lone wolves that sometimes in the middle of winter can starve to death. And when they die in this way, they can become obsessed with that hunger. If at that moment of death they are still obsessed with that idea, then their ghost will gnaw at their bones. Yeah, gnaw at their own flesh until they are driven mad with an obsession of hunger, and they are picked up and carried by the north wind and the cold winds that blow. Yeah? And that is what a Wendigo truly is. In the modern pop culture, we often get this idea that the Wendigo is some kind of shapeshifter or werewolf of some kind. We may get to a werewolf at some point in this playlist. In fact, we probably will. I've talked about it a little bit before, but we'll cover it again in the future, the werewolf and maybe even the Lucaroo. But that is not what the Wendigo is. Yeah? The Wendigo is a hungry spirit. It is the spirit of hunger in the form of a starving wolf. Like in the Ouroboros behind me here, you can think of it as a wolf that is eating itself up. But it is getting smaller and smaller, gnawing at its bones until it becomes nothing, until it becomes just a small spirit that is carried on the wind. And this is a spirit that has not passed over, of course. This is a spirit that is trapped on the material plane, and the only thing it knows is hunger. And the true fear of the Wendigo is that it will get into someone who is hungry. Yeah, back in the days, we lived in lodge houses communal lodge houses that we stayed in for the winter, and when food runs scarce and the hunger began to grow and gnaw at your bellies, the fear was that the north wind would blow one of these hungry wolves into your belly and gnaw at your bones and gnaw inside of you until your belly becomes so empty that you become a cannibal. Yeah? That is the fear here. Wendigo is cannibalism. It is this inner hunger that takes over and becomes something inhuman, becomes possessed by this spirit of a hungry wolf. Yeah? Now, the spirit hasn't necessarily gone away, but we'll get to that in a moment. Now that I've given this thing a name, now that I have said it, I must, of course, also tell you how to resist the biting wind. How to keep the biting wind from getting into your belly and into your soul and letting that hunger overtake you. And it is simply this. No matter how much fear, terror, hunger, or whatever anything puts inside of you, your body is your own. Yeah? Your higher soul, your lower soul, all of it, are the things that are most connected to this body. Your hands are at the wheel. If you want to think of it like a car, yeah? Your hands are at the wheel, always. There is no taking your hands from the wheel. And so, if something tries to possess you, you have to allow them to turn the wheel, because you are ultimately in control. And you must remember that. Yeah? I suppose it's a thing of willpower. When it comes to hunger, with hunger gnawing at you, if something like this begins to blow, I guess, upon you, then you must always know that it is your choice. You cannot give in. And that is how one resists the Wendigo if it is blowing in your own belly. Yeah? Okay, so like I said, in the modern pop culture, we have this idea of a shape-shifting werewolf type being. That is not what the Wendigo is. But it doesn't mean the Wendigo is gone. Yeah, we don't have those days anymore where we are trapped in small family units in the cold and hunger. Yeah? Famine is quite rare in the modern age, at least for the moment. And so these spirits have no hungry bellies that are that hungry to crawl inside of. At least not as common as they once were. Instead, these spirits are into the Zeitgeist, into the spirit of all that surrounds us. Yeah? They are what drives much of the greed that man suffers. Now the Wendigo is that which those who hoard resources to the extent that beyond reasonable means. Yeah? This is the Wendigo of the modern day. Those who hoard resources to such extent that no one else has anything. Those few people that own the world. Perhaps these are the modern day Wendigo. Perhaps that is where these spirits have gone. I don't want to really get into a lot of theories on that, because that goes out of the range of what we talk about on this channel. So we'll leave that for that. We'll leave that there and discuss the Wendigo in a bit more detail and why this pertains to sorcery itself. Yeah. Well, as I said, Wendigos are not gone. Perhaps they are not as powerful as they once were because hunger is not as deep as it once was. Now, there are people in this world that are starving to death this very day, just not often up in the north. I'm sure it still happens. And these things could still happen in that manner, but not to the extent that they once did. So, this spirit, however, is still there. And if you do come across one of these spirits, this is not something that should ever be worked with. Yeah? Even if perhaps you want to become perhaps a more powerful warrior, there are better ways. Yeah? This isn't a warrior spirit. This isn't something that one would come to for that. Yeah, this would be something that actually provides more weakness than power. There is no power to be had in seeking the Wendigo. There is only pain and suffering. Yeah? The lone wolf is not a powerful creature in this nature. This is a thing of hunger and frailty that if it does get food, it goes for that thing that is weakest, those few things that it can overtake. This is not a being of power. This is not something one should ever seek. So, if one becomes across one of these things, do not engage. Yeah, this is something that should be at almost any cost removed. This is a being that is suffering. This is a wolf, a proud, noble being. The wolf is a beautiful animal, but this wolf's soul has been driven mad by hunger, and it must be released. It must be allowed to cross over. And so that should be the goal if one has to engage with a Wendigo, is to get it to cross over. And there are many ways to do this. At this point, perhaps even using the S1 sigil and broadcasting it towards the spirit would allow it to cross over. That has worked with many other spirits. I have not come across a Wendigo directly. There are a few times where I feel I may have sensed their presence, but mostly while I was being told these tales. Yeah, so it's perhaps less an actual wolf and more of some primordial thing within man when we get too hungry. Like I said here, the true fear is that of the cannibal. Saw this as the hungry wind, as a wolf howling its hunger in the wind, because that's when they knew hunger, was when the earth was frozen and they're all huddled together, and eventually, the pemmican and stuff perhaps begins getting low towards the end of the winter, and that hunger gnaws at the belly. Okay, so, as I said, one should be trying to remove these beings, and there is even, to some extent, a tradition of Wendigo hunters. This is more with other traditions than the one that my family has passed down to me. I didn't get a lot about hunting them in the sense of what I've heard in myths from other people that I'm not going to get into, because that is not something I would encourage when like I said, to me and to our people, so what I was taught, this is something that comes and goes. This isn't something that's usually attached to one person. And I don't care to get into those ideas, because that, to me, is another idea. Once you get there, you are now, it's essentially a witch hunt. Yeah, it's the same difference. Fearing that these spirits are in somebody that isn't actively engaging in the behavior produces witch hunts, just like any other superstition. This is something that became very fear-driven. That's why I kind of hesitated to do this video. There's a lot of superstition and fear, and giving it a name perhaps drives that to some extent, but at the same time, it is important to be aware of these things that may exist. But know that, like I said, this is something that can be resisted up until that last moment, and even after that last moment. So, hunting of Wendigos in that nature isn't something that I want to encourage. That being said, I'm going to share an image of a doll that I created for the purpose of removing Wendigos, because like I said, they do need to be passed over. And these types of dolls are used to hunt down the spirit itself and remove it. Yeah? We're not talking about harming any people here. Nothing about hunting those that have the spirit in them. This is about hunting the spirit itself and removing it from this plane and allowing that wolf spirit to cross all the way over and be released from the suffering that it is itself being subjected to. Okay, so that's going to be it for this episode, the first of the Cryptid Tales. Thank you once again for joining us. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please take the opportunity to do so now. Until next time, bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tal.